It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you.
And thanks to Ted for letting me do the honors of talking with you.
I'm delighted that you're doing it.
Well, I know you're used to talking without somebody with a bunch of notes, but I figured I'd help guide you through a little bit of this book for this good audience of people who come out to these events and are big Drucker devotees. So thank you all for being here this morning. I wanted to start by saying that this book isn't just for people who are managers. This isn't for people who are middle managers or up, right? You intend for this book to be a guidebook for everyone.
I did, but I do actually teach managers at the Kellogg School of Management, whether you're a leader or a manager of your family, or in a school, or in a church, or in a community, or a country, or the world. The principles are the same, and in my view, leadership is about unfolding your potential for greatness, but also the potential of everybody that you interact with.
And this is, so we're going to get an abridged version of what people pay thousands of dollars for at the Kellogg School this morning in the next 40 minutes, which is great. But you still have to buy the book too, because we can only cover so much. But why is it that those principles, the principles of the soul, are seen as so squishy? Why is it that that's not something that's given more attention?
How many people in this audience think they have a soul? Anyone who doesn't believe in it? So there you are. You know, we believe that we have a soul, but we can't find it. You know, there's no place where you can locate it. And I have my own reasons for believing that that's because it's transcendent, that it does not exist in space-time. And I come from a wisdom tradition that says, you are not in your body, the body is in you. You're not in the world is in you. You're not in the mind is in you. And by you, I mean a fundamental core consciousness. And that fundamental core consciousness is where we have, where we derive meaning and relationships, and where we tell ourselves stories. Life is a story, you know, we live out our stories. So usually when you meet people in the plane or you know, the party, what do you ask them? You usually ask them, what do you do and where do you live? Which to me are very mundane questions. I want to know who you are, and what do you want, and what's your story? That gives me a much deeper insight into who you really are. I don't want your bio, I want your story. And that gives me an idea of who you are. So when I do my course at Kellogg, I have people answer the following questions. Who are you? What do you want? What's your purpose? What kind of contribution do you want to make? Whether it's in your organization or business or in the community, family, world. What's your legacy going to be? What is a meaningful relationship to you? What does a best friend mean to you? What are your unique skills and talents? Do you have any heroes or heroines in history, in mythology, in religion, or politics? In other words, do you have role models or mentors? Have you ever had a peak experience of transcendence? Perhaps when you fell in love, or perhaps when you saw your firstborn child, or perhaps when you made a scientific discovery. That thrill, that aha moment of creativity, of insight, of imagination, of intuition, of the fact that I can make conscious choices. So when I do this, and I ask people, don't even have to know the answers. Just live those questions. And if you do, life has a very interesting way of moving you into the answers. So that's basically the soul. Okay? The soul is meaning, context, relationship, and story. And many times mythical stories, archetypal stories, because they're bigger than you are. You know, what is myth? Myth is our collective imagination. And when we look at mythical stories, read the mythical stories in the Bible or any other literature, they're about impossible things, you know. So when you stretch beyond the possible, then you may get somewhere. You know, if you want to go 1,000,000 miles, you might at least go 100 miles. You stretch beyond what you can reach. Tap into the collective imagination, because there is the source of creativity.
Everything you're saying sounds so great, but these people are busy. They're carrying Blackberries, iPhones, they've got kids, they've got jobs, they're looking for jobs, they're starting businesses.
Let me give you some statistics.
Good.
If your manager, whoever your manager is, or perhaps you're a manager, if your manager ignores you, your rate of disengagement goes up by 45%. If your manager criticizes you, your rate of disengagement falls to 20%, because you would rather be criticized than ignored. When you're ignored, you don't exist. If your manager notices a single strength of yours, authentic strength, your rate of disengagement goes to less than 1%. This has huge economic implications. Okay, so in the American workforce, we know statistically, I'm a senior scientist at the Gallup Organization, we know statistically that only 20% of the American workforce is actually engaged, which means they're having fun. Okay, 20% are actively disengaged, which means they come to work unhappy, but with the specific purpose of making other people unhappy. Okay? And the rest are just plain disengaged, which means they're punching in the time. Okay, they're counting, waiting for the weekend. This has about $380 billion of economic implication, according to Gallup. Okay. There are many other fascinating statistics. If you have a happy friend, your happiness goes up by 15%. If your happy friend has a happy friend that you don't know, it goes up by another 10%. And if a happy friend has a happy friend who has a happy friend that you don't know, it still is incremental. Okay, because right now we are having a conversation where I'm speaking to all of you, and actually what's happening is all the people in my life are influencing this conversation.
Right.
So it's not just you and me, it's a lot of people here that are not even present, okay? And when we realize that, then we realize the implications of, you know, so my book goes through 7 principles of leadership, and each of these principles is ultimately about outcomes. But you know, if you focus only on outcomes, you'll get stressed. Ignore success and pursue excellence, and you'll feel good about it.
Peter Drucker famously said, management is a liberal art. Everything you're saying makes sense with what Peter Drucker believed, but yet CEOs are not judged on whether their employees are engaged or how connected they are.
That's because CEOs are only looking at outcomes and bottom lines and not realizing that these bottom lines are actually dependent on everything else. You know, in a business, for example, there are a few constituencies. There's investors, there are the employers, there are the employees, and there are customers. If I was to focus on one thing, it would be the employees. If your employees are happy, your customers are going to be happy. If your customers are going to be happy, your investors are going to be happy. And ultimately, the business is going to be happy. So, and there's again data to prove this. You know, so when we speak to managers, it's very important to be not just talking this wishy-washy, soft skills, because they are actually the harder skills. It's easy to measure things, you know, but it's much more difficult to be centered, to be compassionate in a situation that seems to be threatening you. But you can train yourself to do that. You know, there's lots of now interesting information of what we call neuroplasticity, how you can use your cortical brain to influence your limbic brain, your emotional brain, and how you can totally override your midbrain. which is the brain that evolved 300 million years ago, which in a threatening situation either fights or runs or competes, or, when I was in medical school, the way we remember the functions of the reptilian brain, as it's called, the 4 F's: feeding, fighting, fleeing, and reproduction. And so most of the activity in business and the world is that, unfortunately.
How do you convince Wall Street of that, though?
I was just on Wall Street last week and talking to very senior people in Wall Street, because they're questioning now, their karmic debt that they're having to pay, okay? With all the companies that have folded, all the Wall Street scandals. Wall Street, if I may say so, has had a lot of cronyism, influence peddling, power mongering, corruption, and we're paying the price. Our economy is built not on real value. If you look at the $2.2 trillion that circulates in the world's markets today, and this is a fact, you can go check it, less than 2% of the $2.2 trillion that circulates in the world's markets is goods and services. The rest is money, making money, making money, making money to make money. And people who do that, you ask them, are you having a good time with your money? Are you really enjoying your wealth? And they're not. They're making money to make money to make money to make money. It's totally senseless, okay? And they look at their, their balance sheets, right, and that's how they get rush. Okay?
You said something about people spending money they don't have to buy things to impress people they don't like.
Well, it's actually spending money that you haven't earned to buy things that you don't need to impress people that you don't like. And then wondering why you have all the stress.
And for that we can thank the financial meltdown.
Yes, and I think it's a great thing, because now we're going to have real value. You see, I said 20% of people are only having a good time. I met a woman the other day in New York, and she was unemployed. She said, I worked in a high-tech company. I said, were you having a good time? She said, no. So I said, but now I'm out of a job. I don't know what to do. But I asked her, were you happy at the job? No, I was miserable. I said, what do you really enjoy doing? She said, I like to cook. I said, go on the internet and tell people that you'll come and cook at their parties, okay? And you're a gourmet cook. Well, she has a thriving business right now. She cannot accept all the calls she gets from people by word of mouth and through the internet that she's advertising what she's good at, okay? And now she's trying to hire a few other people to help her, and she wants to start a restaurant and all that. And this was a great thing for her.
So the idea is to look at the adversity in the face, or the seemingly difficult circumstance, and figure out how to
There are a group of happiness researchers, and by the way, it's a very legitimate area of research now. Why are some people happy and why aren't the others? And it seems like there's something in the brain called the set point for happiness.
Yeah.
And the set point for happiness is determined in the first 3 years of life through something called mirror neurons and social interactions with your parents and other people. So if your parents were always looking at problems and complaining, then you grow up to be a whiner. And if they were, wherever there was a problem and they saw an opportunity, that's the difference between happy and unhappy people, by the way. Where there's a problem, there's an opportunity, okay? I was at a debate with Leonard Mlodinow. He's a physicist at Caltech, at least he was until he became a full-time writer. And, he argued with me over there, pointed out some things that he disagreed with and still disagrees with me. And we ended up writing a book together, okay, where we disagree, okay? So that's an opportunity, right? So if your set point is, and my set point was influenced by my mother, I'd like to tell you a story about that. But if your set point is already created in the first 3 years of life, then I think your first reaction is, I'm screwed. What am I going to do, right?
Yes.
But there are things you can do. And there's what we call mindfulness training that will totally change your set point. And it's easy, okay? It's also reflection will change your set point. You say, this belief is limiting me. Is it really true? Am I 100% sure if it's true? And then there's, I don't know if anyone's familiar with the work of Katie Byron, but she's popularized this. You know, is this true? Am I 100% sure if it's true? What's holding on to this belief doing to me? Who would I be without it? And how do I think in exactly the opposite way? They're what we call ANTs, automatic negative thinking. It's automatic because you're programmed into it. But you have a choice to change the programming.
What are the most popular courses? At Drucker is taught by a man named Jeremy Hunter, apparently, and it's all about teaching meditation. And you've said that you take a week off every few months to sit in silence. Can you talk a little bit about how passivity is not, peace is not passivity? You write about that in the book.
Well, when you take time to be silent, you get in touch with your being. We call ourselves human beings, not human doings, right? And yet everybody's a human doing all the time. You know, there's no time to just be, you know. Let me ask you to do something right now. As you're listening to me right now, turn your attention to who's listening. So as you're listening to me, be aware of the listener. There's some awareness there. There's a simple consciousness there. It's not your mind which might be saying, I wish I'd gone to the bathroom before the lecture. Okay? That's a conversation, okay? That conversation happens in a core consciousness. And most people are not even aware of that. Okay? That's your being. Your mind is thinking. Okay, your body is doing, but there's a being in which all this happens. That core consciousness was there when you were a baby. Okay, it was there when you were a teenager. Different mind, different body. You know, and the great wisdom tradition said, hold on to that. That's the only part of yourself that's real. Okay, and that again, in the wisdom traditions, that part of you is a field of possibilities. Okay, it's a field from where intention comes. It's a field of uncertainty. It proliferates with uncertainty, which is great because the more the uncertainty, the more the creativity. It's a field of creativity. That's where you have insight, intuition, imagination, creativity, conscious choice making. So for me, it's like having a bath. You know, I do it every day for a few minutes in the day. I do specific mindfulness practices, but then I'm mindful even in activity. Krishnamurti, who was a great Indian philosopher in this area, he said the highest form of human intelligence is the ability to observe yourself without judging yourself. Because in the mere observation, there is insight. Can I tell you a little story?
Yeah.
So how did this course come to be? You know, the Kellogg School of Management, which for several years was rated the #1 business school in the country, and now they've fallen to 3 or 4 whatever, but you know, I don't know how they make those judgments. The course is called The Soul of Leadership. And obviously people are intrigued by it because the soul of leadership. But this title was gestating in my consciousness when I was since the age of 7. And that's why I tell you my hero was my mother, okay, because she built everything that I am now. You know, it comes from that time. It's the first 3 years of life. Research shows that. I was 7 years of age and living in a small town in India called Jabalpur. My father was an army doctor, and the British Army then during the Second World War, and then in the Indian Army. My mother was the best mother in the world. And I had my little brother was 4 years of age. He's now the Dean of Medical Education at Harvard Medical School. So I'm very proud of him. And we read in the newspaper that Mr. Nehru, our Indian Prime Minister, leader, was coming to the little town to cut the ribbon for an automobile factory. And so for 3 weeks, there was only one conversation in our house. And that was, what was the color of the sari that my mother would wear for the occasion? And my father would tease her and say, you know, there's going to be lots of people on the street. He's not going to notice your sari. So on the day that he came, we were on the street at 4 in the morning. Okay? And by 7 in the morning, when the sun was rising, there were millions of people on the street. And when I say millions, in India it means millions, okay? It's not an exaggeration. Seething masses of humanity, okay? And people on treetops, people hanging on window ledges, on each other's shoulders. And 9 o'clock, 5 hours after we'd been on the street, the motorcade came. He was standing in a jeep. He had a white Nehru jacket, as we call it now, and a rose in his lapel, which was his trademark, a red rose, a jeep in the front, a jeep in the back. The crowd went crazy. The jeep went by us. And then Mr. Nehru turned. He looked at my mother. He took his rose out and he threw it at her. You know, the crowd gasped, but my mother stepped forward like a queen, picked up the rose, and she looked at my father and she said, Daddy, what did I tell you? And then we knew she was the leader. He wore the medals from his World War II, but she ruled the house. We went home. She emptied her room. She placed a table like this in the middle of the room, a vase, the rose, and for 3 weeks people came to our house to look at the rose. And it was amazing. You know, I didn't know what was going on, but you know, they'd come into the room, they'd take their shoes off, they would tiptoe and look at the rose. And so that afterwards, 3 weeks, the rose started to fade, and she had a party. She invited her important friends, and at the end of the party, everybody received a faded rose petal. And I said to her, what's so special about those? And she said something I've never forgotten. She said, they represent symbolically the soul of India. I said, what do you mean soul of India? She said the longings, the aspiration, the imagination, the excitement. Okay, and that came through Mahatma Gandhi to Mr. Nehru. And because this was the symbol, it reminded us of our dream. And so for me, that became the working definition. As a leader, you are the soul of a group consciousness. And that means you represent their dreams, their aspirations, their longings, their potential for the greater good. You see, one of the things we do in Kellogg, by the way, even in the school, entering school class, not just the executives, but the kids who come to do their MBAs, we ask them, answer the following questions. What kind of world do you want to live in? What kind of business do you want to be part of? What kind of team that you want to lead? What is your contribution to that team? What will you contribute, but what will you expect of your team? And this is questions, not telling anything. In fact, our whole course is around questions. You live the right questions and life will give you the answers. But if you don't ask the questions, then nothing. So, you know, when the 500 students in Kellogg, and we take all their answers anonymously, and we project them on the screen. I do that with my class too. I teach leadership at Frito-Lay, which is, you know, division of Pepsi. Same questions. Then we project the answers, and everybody looks at them and says, you know, I thought I was running a business, but I want to change the world. And they all feel that. And they feel they're not even alone. So that's what a great leader is.
Your job really is to make the people on your team look good.
Look good, and if you're successful, then give credit to everyone, and if you're not successful, take the responsibility, because you're the leader.
How many people have ever worked for someone like that?
Okay, so here's what we do, if you're bold enough, and you have to be. If a company asks me to come and say, turn us around, I say, I'm going to lay down certain conditions if you really want to turn it around, and so give it a little time. Just know, by the way, that Frito-Lay is going into carbon neutral manufacturing. They are saving $7 billion of water, have cut down their water utilization. They are changing into nutritional foods, and they are embarking on wellness campaign. That's a whole turnaround in a company, and it's consistent with the times. Okay, so fortunately, I work with a very, very powerful, compassionate, visionary leader. Al Carey is the CEO of the company. There are others that I work with like that. But you know, one of the things we do in our small groups is management teams is you sit down with the management team and you ask everybody in the room to write down in 1 or 2 words what you would like your manager to do better. Okay, anonymously. Throw it in a hat and you give it to the manager. And he then has to put it on his board behind his seat. And then the next 3 weeks he has to meet with his team and say, am I doing those things that you wanted me to do? Okay, that's honest, that has integrity, and that's transformative. Okay, so we do lots of things like that, you know. I also ask your team to say in 1 word what you like about your manager. And they put that and they project it. Wow, you know, they like me so much about these things, but they think I could improve on these things. And that kind of feedback, not only with the manager, but with the whole team. You know, so we say, okay, how are you going to harness the creativity of this team? Harness the passion of this team? You know, and how are you going to increase the self-esteem of this team? And there are only certain things that, first is that whole childhood thing, you know, which is responsible for your self-esteem. You have to address it. But then if you are living your values, then you will have self-esteem. If you're passionate about what you do, your strength, you'll have an effective team. You know, at Gallup, we do this test called Strength Finders, and I've modified it for the book as well. There are about 35 strengths that people have, of which 5 things they're good at. So for me, here are my 5 strengths. I'm a maximizer, which means I maximize the utility of my time. I don't waste my time on anything that's banal or trivial or not fun. Fun is included as maximizing time. Okay, play, fun is included. I am futuristic. I am adaptable. I am a communicator, and I am compassionate. Those are my 5 strengths. Now I focus on them. You know, in fact, at Gallup, we also, if you go to the Gallup offices, you'll see everybody is wearing their strengths on their sleeve. And if you go I go into your office, I'll know what your strengths are, and you'll know what I am. And so we play. You know, I'm not a good executor, I'm told, according to this. So I surround myself with executors. My assistant Carolyn is the most amazing executor in the universe, you know, and she in turn has executors for her. So, you know, you build teams that Jim Collins said, put the right people in the right seat in the bus. Okay, that's a good team.
I've spent a lot of time in Bhutan over the last 4 years, which is the happiest place on earth, and they measure gross national happiness. It's a Buddhist, devoutly Buddhist kingdom. And you would think that that place would be governed by all of the principles that you're talking about. But there are a lot of unhappy people running around offices in Bhutan, and that surprised me. So I feel a little dire sometimes about the state of the world if that place has a hard time
Yeah, maybe that statistic is not totally accurate. It's kind of romanticized because of the 60 Minutes program that CBS did.
Hype, yeah.
Actually, the happiest people in the world are in Scandinavian countries. And, you know, if you think you need to be poor to be happy, forget it, okay? There's only one group of people that think more about money than the rich, and it's the poor. Okay, because they can think of nothing else. Okay, so you don't need to be poor to be happy. You don't need to be extremely rich to be happy. In fact, the statistics show that if you win a lottery, in 1 year you'll have returned to your set point, and in 5 years you'll be more mean-spirited than you were before you won the lottery. So, you know, the statistics, I think, are variable right now, but they're confusing also. Scandinavian countries have the highest well-being scores on happiness and physical and emotional well-being, but then there are surprises. People in Puerto Rico are very happy. People in Latin countries are generally happier. You know, and they're more affectionate, they like to touch, they're more tactile. And there was a study that was done by a psychologist who went to cafes and observed how frequently people touch each other. In Florida, it was 2 tactile contacts per hour. In Latin America and Puerto Rico, it was 80. In Italy, it was 100 and something. Then he went to England and he waited and waited and nothing happened. So, you know, I was very intrigued by this because, you know, many years ago I had seen a study that was published in the journal Science, actually, on rabbits that were being fed diets that were extremely high in cholesterol. And to their amazement, there was one group of rabbits that didn't get the same cholesterol levels. You know, rabbits are very susceptible to hyperlipidemia, atherosclerosis, and so on. And they couldn't figure out what had happened. And then they found that the technician who was feeding these rabbits, instead of throwing the food at them, he would pet them and cuddle them and sing to them. And then he'd give them the same toxic food. But it turned out it was metabolized into a different metabolic pathway because they secreted different neurotransmitters as a result of this experience. You know, these implications. So what we've found is financial well-being, career well-being, physical well-being, social well-being, and community well-being are entangled. And I'm not using this word in the quantum physics sense, but they all have something to do with each other. Okay, they all co-create each other. You can't be one. You know, if you're very wealthy but you're stressed out and you're smoking 2 packs of cigarettes, what good is that wealth doing? They're all connected. Well-being is the most important thing. Focus on well-being and everything else will come. Success too.
Emotional, physical,
yeah.
Taking care of your physical space.
Physical well-being, emotional well-being, financial well-being, career well-being. What you need on Wall Street, and I said this, I went to wallstreet.com, or what is it, thestreet.com. Everybody was so serious looking at their computers. There was not a smile in the room. And I said, you need some music, flowers, some playfulness, you know? And you do that. And we think we need to introduce the feminine in corporate culture in a way that we've never seen before. In fact, the United Nations, no, this is, according to the United Nations, the fastest way to improve the world is the economic empowerment of women in corporate culture. This is a well-known statistic. You know, because you then bring in some nurturing, you bring in some tenderness, you bring in affection, you bring in... Women like to gossip, okay? More than men do, at least, or they talk about their life to each other at the workplace. And now we are saying that, at Gallup we are saying, unless you have 6 hours of that social interaction every day, you're not going to be physically healthy. Okay, so talk to each other. Talk about your problems. Help each other, and your performance will be better. So we actually give time for people to talk in companies and play and take a break and share.
How do you reconcile all of that?
I went yesterday to Google, by the way, and you should see the environment there. Amazing.
It's fun?
The energy is so good. Okay, the cafeterias, they have all kinds of cuisines, you know, and free. Okay, so they have Chinese food, Indian food, Italian food, whatever you want. There's playrooms, there's music rooms, there's exercise rooms, there's gyms, there's massage rooms. And these people don't want to leave. They're having such a good time. And there's a premium on creativity. It's appreciated. You break the boundaries. Silent brainstorming, have you heard of silent brainstorming? You get a group of people in the room, you present a problem, and you say, give me a solution. And just write down 5 ideas, or write down as many, and don't worry how outrageous they are. And do it anonymously. You take that whole thing, project it on the screen. You have like 600 ideas. Okay, then you tell the same group, now out of those 600, choose 100 that you think are most exciting, and doesn't matter if they are outrageous either. And you do it again silently, without saying anything, and anonymously. And you then whittle them down to the 10 most exciting and also the most practical. And you suddenly have so much play, so much fun, and you have something practical emerging out of that. So there's a movement now on collective creativity, collective intention, collective intelligence. And with the social networks that we have, that's going to be the next thing. I can get 5 doctors in a room about a problem a patient has, and I don't get specialists, because specialists don't think outside the box. Okay, if I want to solve a medical problem, whether it's a heart problem or a cancer problem, I get generalists. Okay, because they think outside their discipline, you know, and you get 5 or 10 people, and you say, find a solution for this patient, and they will. I mean, this is so exciting for me when you're actually seeing practical outcomes, not only in business but in health, and in outcomes of well-being from disease. You see it because specialists are so specialized in their own little thing, and especially in academia, they're looking for accolades, Nobel Prizes, whatever. They never go outside their discipline.
We're going to open up for questions in just a minute. I want to ask you about technology and how to deal with multitasking. But
I love technology.
Talk about it, because I'm worried about how much technology competes for our ability to focus and interact with people for real.
Technology doesn't compete. Technology is neutral. What do you want to do with it? And first of all, if you're against technology, you're going to be obsolete. Okay? The capacity of technology is doubling every year. So in 10 years, the capacity of technology is going to be 1 billion times what it is today. In 20 years, it's beyond your imagination. So if you say, I'm against technology, well, you're going to be obsolete. But then say, what am I going to use the technology for? I can shut off my BlackBerry. I went to live as a monk in Thailand for 3 weeks. Shaved my head, became anonymous, and begged on the streets for my food, and had no access to technology. It was my choice. Okay, so you can turn your BlackBerry off with meal times and other times. You can focus on one thing at a time, but this technology is amazing. The other day on Twitter, somebody asked me, I want to find the right person in my relationship, and how do I do it? And I tweeted back. I said, instead of looking for the right person, why don't you become the right person? Okay? Now that thing was tweeted, and in 5 hours, 5 million people had seen that. Imagine, the power of ideas today. So if you want to see a world with social justice, economic empowerment, getting rid of extreme nationalism, conflict resolution, what are our problems right now? We live in a world that is full of violence, where we are destroying the environment, eco-destruction. 50% of the world lives on less than $2 a day. How can you have peaceful world where we're risking sustainability and yet we have so much creativity and we're not harnessing it. And I think it's going to happen. You know, it's inevitable. You know, I went to a conference on creativity in India just 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, or 4 weeks ago, I forget, I don't track time. But there was this one person who developed an umbrella that unfolded like a windmill, okay, and he has a little suction device, he puts it on the top of his car and it generates electricity. Now he's got a group of people that are generating so much electricity that they've created a company that sells the electricity. Okay, and everywhere you go, these are suction devices, windmills. I went to a place in Ireland where they are harnessing, of course, the waves of the ocean for energy. There's tremendous amount of creativity. Get beyond your ego and find people who share your ideas with you and your imagination. And it's the future. It's going to happen.
Is there an activity that as an entrepreneur we should be performing on a daily basis to get to a better place emotionally or in our businesses?
Yeah, the activity is taking even 5 to 10 minutes in the morning, putting your attention in your heart, and I have reasons to say that, but we won't go into this. The heart has reasons that reasons does not know. You put your heart there, attention, and say first some really profound questions. Who am I? What do I want? But then visualize in your mind what you want to see as an entrepreneur. A year from now, 5 years from now. And then at the same time, visualize what that will do to you, to your relationships, to your employees, to the community, and feel it emotionally. And when you can energize yourself and create an emotional connection with your vision as an entrepreneur, you'll be amazingly successful.
You mentioned earlier that we should live certain questions, and one of the questions that you indicated that we should live was, what is your purpose?
Yes.
How can we figure that out?
First, by asking that question and listening to your own self, listening to your heart, but also ask yourself, if you had all the money in the world and all the time in the world, how would you spend and express yourself, your unique self? Because everyone has a unique, you know, every individual, in my view, is a unique action of the total universe. And I mean that, literally. You are a unique action of the total universe that began 13.8 billion years ago. And therefore, there's something very special about you. Okay, so you ask yourself, if I had all the time and the money in the world, how would I express my uniqueness? And then go for it, go take a risk. You know, I tell parents, if you have a child who loves to play tennis and hates mathematics, don't get him a math tutor, get him a tennis coach, and one day he'll hire a mathematician to be his accountant.
To quote you from your book, you said something that might be helpful for you. Ask yourself what kind of world you envision and how you see yourself in it.
Yeah.
I thought that was helpful.
Yeah, we asked that of students in Kellogg. What kind of world do you envision, and what's your role in creating that world?
What would you like your legacy to be?
Easy come, easy go. I mean that. You know, I once saw something on a tombstone. It said, "Where you are, I once was, and where I am, you once will be." So when you get in touch with your mortality as this particular unique action of the universe, then you pay attention to the good things in life. You know, what the Buddhists call divine attributes: loving kindness, compassion, joy. Create as much joy as you can. And ultimately, equanimity. As we grow older, the nature, you know, younger people enjoy, their joy is mixed with excitement. As we get older a little bit, then joy is equanimity. But it's still the same feeling inside.
Could you talk a little bit about strategies of noticing the gap between stimulus and response? I love that, and I try to explain it to my friends all the time. I want you to say it, because you say things so great.
The most effective thing is when you get a stimulus that puts you into a habitual Pavlovian conditioned response. Okay, and everyone has those, okay? So somebody pushes your button, so to speak. It could be anything, reminding you of the fact that you didn't close the faucet, or last night the garage door was left open, or somebody blowing their horn on the traffic, and your response is to blow back or whatever, or do this. So whenever you have a response like that, there's a sensation that accompanies that response in the body. We call it a feeling. Feelings are thoughts with sensations. So there's thought and there's a sensation, and it's not a comfortable sensation. So what I have, and I've trained myself to do this, by the way, so you can honestly ask my wife, what's the last time I reacted? Maybe not for 25 years, okay? No anger, no resentment, excitement, yes, but not that. So whenever you have that happening, first thing is stop. Okay? Second thing is focus on the sensation, and then keep it there till it's gone. And you keep doing it. So I say, stop, feel, and do nothing. And slowly your midbrain, which is where this happens, in the amygdala and all that, it'll say, nobody's listening to me. I do something else. I do this, and then I remember an experience of love. Whether it's my little grandchildren or it's, some previous experience that you've had, you just remember it. So what you've done is stop the midbrain, but you've also activated the limbic brain at the same time.
Who are your role models? Like, who are the people that have guided you through your life to become who you are right now?
My mother is the most important role model for me. And my father, actually. He was a military man. He was very scientific. He trained in England. And when I asked him philosophical question, he would say, I can't talk about anything I can't prove. And so we used to have lots of arguments. But that kind of opened up my scientific interest as well. And so I would say my role models have always been my parents. Now, outside of that, I have admired people like Mikhail Gorbachev, who I befriended, because he engaged in conversations with the US that ultimately led to perestroika. And he said something, I once watched a dialogue between him and Ronald Reagan, where he said to Ronald Reagan, he said, Mr. President, I'm going to do something very mean to you. And so Reagan kind of was reactive, said, what? He said, we are going to deprive you of your enemy. And I thought that was an amazing statement to come from a great leader. And Oscar Arias, the leader of Costa Rica. Costa Rica is unilaterally disarmed as a country. They have no standing army. The money is going to education and environment. There are other great leaders, like Nelson Mandela was an amazing leader. In the business world, I think right now the examples are Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, because they're transcending their personal ambition and making a huge difference. And there are many that I know personally who run medium-sized companies. There is a network for social responsibility in business, and you should look it up. And the chairman of Whole Foods, for example, also has his own network of socially responsible businesses. This is an emerging trend right now.
My question is about fear. So everything that you've been saying this morning, they all seem like great action steps, great things that you can do and bring to your business, or bring to, in my case, I lead a band, anything that you're leading. But then there seems...
In your case, what?
A band.
A band.
I lead a rock band. Still leadership. So you have these principles and you have these ideas, and there's that moment where you're ready to follow your instinct to make it happen. And sometimes there's that moment of fear that you just can't get there, and you kind of back out. So, you know, you're as much wisdom and enlightenment you have, you're still a human being. And I wanted to ask you, when you have those moments of fear, what do you do, or what do you think? Is there something that you kind of always come back to get yourself back centered and give yourself that strength to follow your instinct and your intention?
Right. It's very important to feel your fear. It's very important to feel it. If you ignore it, you know, then it only gets stronger. Okay? What you resist persists, as the expression goes. So feel your fear first. And then start doing, I do the practice I mentioned, the mindful practice, I mentioned a little while. But the most important thing is to do what you fear most. You know, keep doing it, what you feel. Feel the fear and then do it. Okay? And if you do it enough times, it'll go. You know, one of my earlier, you know, was an intern, I was very distressed by patients who were dying in the emergency room. You know, you see so much death, and you see death of children. You know, it's very difficult to take that. And so I spent all my time in the morgue, you know, and I spent a lot of time with dying people. And it brought a certain sense of serenity and acceptance to me, and I could be much more compassionate with dying people and make them in turn feel safe, you know. So do it. Band is the perfect place to do it, because, you know, all the adrenaline that comes with it.
Mr. Chopra, you have talked about your grandmother and about Rama and Sita. Have you found your about Rama and Sita?
Rama and Sita.
Right.
The mythology, yes.
Right. Have you found your Sita, and how can anybody find his Sita?
Okay.
Probably define Sita.
My wife, I've been married for, I think, 45 years now. And I think the secret is acceptance and allowing the other person to be who they are. Totally. Okay.